So training for muscle strength versus muscle hypertrophy. These are two different physical qualities and therefore they need to be trained differently. There is some overlap in that you could train for muscle strength and develop some hypertrophy and vice versa. You could train for hypertrophy and develop some strength. But this isn't going to be the ideal way to develop these qualities. So therefore, they do need to be trained differently with different set and rep loadings and different rest periods and different types of exercise as well. So this is what this video is about, just running you through what are the differences between the two and how to optimally develop these qualities. So let's start with muscle strength. So when we talk about strength, we're talking about how much force can be exerted by the body. Basically, how much weight can you lift? So when it comes to strength, the type of exercise is really important. We want to make sure that these are our main compound lifts. So compound lifts is going to be a squat, bench press, deadlift, could be a heavy row, even an overhead press, something like that. So we want to make sure that when we're trying to develop strength, they're going to be the exercises where we can push some weight, push some heavy weight. And because with strength, the weight is going to be high and we're going to be pushing as much force as we can, we want to keep the reps low to ensure that we can, one, maintain that strength output within the set, but also for the quality of the overall session as well. We don't want to start pushing too much weight for too many reps early on and then be gassed for the rest of the session. So keep it low, between 1 to 5 reps, although in saying that, I don't think too many people really need to do 1 rep. I think unless you are a power lifter, then you can probably look to lift for, say, 3 to 5 reps, and that's going to be your optimal range for strength. So in terms of the number of sets you should do per exercise, this is really largely dependent on how often you can train and how long you can train for. So for strength exercises, I probably wouldn't recommend doing any more than twice per week. So it's either going to be once per week or twice per week generally, unless you're very, very advanced. And the difference between training it once per week or twice per week, there's a little bit of a edge in favor of the twice per week, but it's not astronomical. So really, it depends on how long you can train for most of the time. So if you've got the time to smash out a 90-minute session, for example, and I wouldn't recommend doing that every session, but you might be able to get in 4 to 5 working sets. But generally speaking, 2 working sets at a minimum, but ideally 3 or even 4 working sets is going to be the ideal number per exercise. But again, ultimately that depends on how often you can train. So if it's twice per week, this might be on the lower end of the spectrum. Whereas if you're training 4 times per week and splitting your sessions between upper body and lower body, you might be able to hit those exercises twice per week, having 2 upper sessions and 2 lower sessions, which means you could almost have fewer sets within each session because you're hitting it more frequently. And at the end of the day, if you're overtraining and that your body isn't recovering from session to session, then that's probably an indication that you need to pull back a little bit, because then your strength output isn't going to be where you need it to be for optimal strength gains. All right, so now the intensity. Now this is going to be pretty similar between strength and hypertrophy, but ultimately at the end of the day, between the two, the most important thing is getting close to failure. So not necessarily pushing the exercise until you can't do any more reps, but you want to hit just before that point. Now the sweet spot is generally 1 to 3 reps. But if you're going to increase your weight with each set, then I would recommend not going as close to failure. So you might sit around that 2 to 3 reps in the tank range. And then on your last set, you might hit closer to 1 to 2, because you don't want to exert all your energy in the sets where you're building up and still working hard because you're hitting that rep range where you're close to failure, but you don't want to hit right at the edge. So you want to be sort of 2 to 3 as you're building up. And then when you're really getting into the nitty gritty of it, getting in close to that 1 to 2 reps in the tank to really push that strength output. Now, how much rest do you need between sets? This is probably one that goes a little bit under the radar, in that when it comes to strength, it's very neural dependent, meaning that there's high force output coming from up in our brain rather than just the muscle trying to push the weight. So at a minimum, it needs to be 2 minutes, and ideally, I guess according to what the research would say, it would be anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. Now, me personally, even though that is, and I would agree that 3 to 5 minutes is the best, that's not always practical. No one has the time to sit there for 5 minutes and wait for that strength to come back up. So if you do, then go for it. But 2 to 3 minutes is going to be okay as well. All right, now it's time to talk about muscle hypertrophy. Now, hypertrophy, it's a bit of a jargon buzzword that's thrown around pretty often these days, but it basically just means an increase in muscle size. So when we think about the types of exercises that we want to do to increase our muscle size, this can be our compound lifts, so similar to what we train for strength. So this could be bench, deadlift, squat, rows, all those same things. But we also want to throw in our isolation movements. So this could be things like bicep curls, shoulder lateral raises, leg extensions, things like that. So it's not a full body movement. It's basically just the movement of one joint. So bicep curl, we're just bending at the elbow and only working pretty much one muscle, or it's the main target is one muscle. Whereas a squat, full body movement, it's working quads, glutes, a little bit of hamstrings, and very, very straining on the overall body and the overall system. So the number of reps here doesn't actually matter too much. As long, and I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but as long as you are getting close to failure, which I spoke about with strength, between that 1 to 3 sets. So really anywhere from 6 to about 20 reps has been found to be beneficial in increasing muscle size, hypertrophy, but only as long as you are sticking close to that, close to failure range, so 1 to 3 reps. In saying that though, we don't necessarily want to stand there and smash out 20 reps on every exercise if we don't need to. So I would recommend keeping it to the lower end. So depending on the exercise, say if you are doing one of your compound lifts, that might be the lower end, say 6 to 10 or 12 reps. But then for those more isolated movements, this could be anywhere from 8 to 15. So again, the number of sets, similar to strength, it's very dependent upon how often you can train and how long you can train for. But I guess the guiding sort of principle that we want to follow here is for muscle growth, we see significant gains when 8 or more sets are done across a week per muscle group. So if you want to build your quads, for example, you might do 3 sets of squats, 3 sets on a leg press, and 4 sets of leg extensions across a whole week, and that's 10 sets for the quads throughout the week. So that would tick that box more than 8. So you really need to look at, I guess, each session individually and work out if you're meeting that threshold of the 8 working sets. And it's important that it's working sets as well. So that doesn't include your warm-ups where you're not quite reaching that rep range that's getting close to failure. It's your working sets where you're really pushing hard. So the intensity, again, similar to the strength, that we want to get close to failure, but not necessarily hit failure. And there's, I guess, a bit of nuance to this. So with your compound lifts, I would stay away from failure. So similar to strength, that in your sets where you're building up weight, where you're still working hard, you might get to 2 to 3 reps from failure. And then on that last set, you might be 1 rep away from failure, for example. But when it comes to the isolated movements, like your bicep curls, your leg extensions, one, there's less stress on the body and less risk of injury generally with these exercises. So you can really afford to go a little bit closer to failure. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this on every set, but particularly your last, say, set or 2, you could definitely look to leave no reps in the tank. You could utilize drop sets. These are a great way to facilitate muscle growth, but you are in a better position with these exercises to look to get a little bit closer to failure. But as I said, definitely not on every set. You need to be strategic with it. Otherwise, your recovery from session to session isn't going to be very good because you're going to pull up super sore. And the rest for these exercises, anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds. So full recovery doesn't matter too much because I guess we're trying to stress the muscle. And if full recovery isn't there, it doesn't matter too much because we're still looking to work the muscle hard. So a couple of little guiding principles, I guess, to finish with. So if you're going to do strength exercises and hypertrophy exercises within the one session, which is more than fine, there's no rule that you have to separate them, do the strength exercises first. Because of that increased neural component, the strength exercises need to be prioritized, because otherwise if you tire out the muscles beforehand, then the force output is not going to be as strong, which means you're not going to make as many strength gains, which is the main goal of strength training. And secondly, you need to be adaptable within your session. So the rep ranges and the load, they don't matter too much. What's more important is the intensity, and you're getting close to failure to drive that adaptation. Because every day, every session, you don't necessarily know going in how your body is going to react to the exercise or how you're going to perform, because there are so many different external factors that are going to influence this. It could be how much you slept last night, it could be stress at work or home, how much food you've eaten, how much water you've drank today, your recovery from your previous session. There's so many different variables. So you need to be fluid with this. So for example, if you're doing a set of bench press and you plan to do 10 reps at 100 kilos, and you get to rep 8 or rep 9, and it still feels pretty good, then keep pushing those reps and just keep smashing it out until you get to that point where you're within, say, 2 to 3 reps from failure. And then in your next set, add the weight so it gets back to that rep range that you're after, but you're still hitting that intensity as well. And the reverse of this is equally as true as well. There are going to be days where you're planning to bench press 10 reps at 100 kilos and you get to rep 5 and you've got hardly anything left in the tank. Then what you need to do is pull back, and that's okay. As long as the muscle thinks it's getting the adaptation and the desired stress that it needs, then that's all that matters. The only thing that knows what weight is on the bar is your ego up here, and you need to not worry about that, because ultimately it doesn't matter what weight is on the bar. What matters is that you're working the muscle hard. So I guess just to summarize, I want to give a little comparison, I guess a side-by-side comparison of the two, so strength and hypertrophy. So the type of exercises, you're going to have compound lifts for both, but your hypertrophy, you're going to hit more isolated movements. In terms of the number of reps, this is going to be on the lower end for the strength, but a little bit higher for the hypertrophy. In terms of the number of sets for both, it's hard to really put a number on, and it's really dependent upon your training structure and your training schedule. In terms of the intensity, this is going to be similar for both. There's a little bit of nuance to it, as I explained in the video, but generally speaking, trying to hit exercises that get close to failure within those 1 to 3 reps. And the rest for strength exercises, you're going to have a little bit longer rest, at least 2 minutes at a minimum. Whereas on the hypertrophy side of things, it can be anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something from it. If you did, please hit like, subscribe to the channel. It would mean the world to us. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, so please help us get there. Check us out on TikTok as well. The TikTok is blowing up at the moment. Give us a follow over there. There's plenty happening, plenty of exciting little videos, trending and viral videos that Damo and Rob are putting together. So go check out them as well. And if you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below or send us a message on any of our social media platforms.